Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AFPI Vice Chair of the Center for Energy and Environment and the AFPI Chair of the Pennsylvania State Chapter, Ambassador Carla Sands.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. This is fantastic. I wanted to first say that after I served as President Trump's ambassador to Denmark, I came back to the US, and within a few months, there was an event at Mar-a-Lago. And a woman named Brooke Rollins presented to us her vision for how we could make America great, putting the American people first. And she was just starting this up. It was actually what she wanted to do in the second term of the Trump administration that she had been working on as President Trump's domestic policy advisor at the White House. And her vision was inspiring, but I was getting ready to run for the Senate. So I introduced myself and just kept thinking about her. And after my run ended, I reconnected with Brooke, and I told her I wanted to work on energy because having been ambassador and then a Senate candidate throughout our state, I realized it was the bedrock of our energy was the bedrock of our economic security and our national security and our family's happiness. So I'm excited because not only am I working on energy, I'm also the chair for the Pennsylvania State Chapter. And we're working to bring the policies that we're working on in the Capitol, in Washington, D.C., here to Pennsylvania. We're excited about that because Pennsylvania has so much potential. We have so much opportunity here in so many ways, and we've just lost our way. And we can see that with the bad legislation that comes out that doesn't help Pennsylvania families. I'm also a senior advisor at America First Works. That's our C4 arm at America First Policy Institute. And what we're working on here in Pennsylvania are the 4 key counties of the 19 that we need to win in order to win the presidency back this year. And they are Bucks, Montgomery, Allegheny, and Chester counties. And those 4 counties we're focused on, but we're looking at all the counties. And I wanted to just say that I'm honored that my parents, Dr. Jack Hurd and Barbara Hurd, were able to join us tonight. I'm very thrilled about that. And so when Brooke Rollins said to me, look, we're going to start these state chapters, and we'd like you to chair Pennsylvania, what do you think? And I prayed about it, I reflected on it, I thought, yes, I'll do it. This is an important mission. And I talked to my pastor, and I talked to elected officials I knew. And finally, I talked to Senator Chris Dush, asking, do you know anybody wonderful that could be our executive director in Pennsylvania? And he said, I think you should talk to Mary Stifler. I think she would be a wonderful executive director for AFPI Pennsylvania. And so now I would like to introduce the best state director anyone could hope for, Mary Stifler. Thank you.
Wow, that was a nice introduction, Carla. Thank you so much. This is an extreme honor that if someone would have explained to me a year ago that I would be standing here talking to all of you fine people who I share goals and objectives with and aspirations. So I am Mary Stifler. I'm the executive director of Pennsylvania's state chapter of America First Policy Institute. And I want to tell you a little bit about AFPI. We are a 501c3, so as a recovering political operative, it's a different lane. So as Carla introduced you to our C4, we definitely have some different goals and objectives between the political side and the policy side, and I can't think of 2 people to work both those lanes, I want to say every single day. Than the 2 of us with all the people that we have helping. I want to thank everyone for coming. I know this is probably the busiest week in the Capitol, so I'm just so excited that everybody took time out of their schedule. We have a fantastic program for you tonight. We're going to be focusing on energizing Pennsylvania, empowering the United States of America going forward. We do have vast resources, and our panel tonight and our wonderful fireside chat with our friend Linda McMahon and Carla Sands. It's going to be wonderful. Before I dive into the program, I would like to introduce you to America First Policy Institute. We have 9 former cabinet members. We have more than 50 White House senior staff, and we have hundreds of industry leaders and experts that are driving that America First policy and giving us the solutions that are going to get us along our way. We have 20 centers. So when I tell people 20 centers, what do you mean centers? I think of centers of excellence. And I get a little intimidated sometimes when I look at those people that are filling those centers. So we focus on education, energy, and environment. A lot of those folks are here with us tonight. Foreign policy, which, I'm sorry, but we have to focus on foreign policy. Even as a state chapter, we see foreign policy, how it's going to impact Pennsylvania. Government accountability, healthcare, law and order, security, social issues, and values. After securing 400 wins at the state level last year, they had the great idea to launch 5 state chapters. And so there's Arizona, California, Florida, Georgia, and our favorite, Pennsylvania. So we're very excited that we're able to bring those America First policies right here to the state. The vision was always to bring the America First policies to the state. This is where the real action is. This is where the difference is made. And especially, the representatives and the senators who are here tonight. And also, I want to mention, when we talk about accountability and transparency, no one leads the way more than our state treasurer, Stacey Garrity. And if you ever want to go dive down the rabbit hole, you go to her website, and then, I couldn't sleep for a day after I went in there and just saw, I don't even know what it's like a web, and she's done a really good job, though, of starting to untangle it. So Pennsylvania has a very rich history of the cradle. Carla and I talk about this all the time. This is the cradle of innovation, and really we are the Keystone State. So we're going to be the keystone for this next piece of our history as well. In recent years, though, our economy has suffered. We've had challenges that I don't even want to get into because we want to do a more aspirational experience this evening. I don't have to remind anyone what they're seeing at the grocery store, at the gas pump, or in every aspect of our daily lives. I can't think of any aspect that is not touched right now on the policies of the current administration, both in Washington, D.C. and here in our great capital of Harrisburg. I can't think of 2 people to lead us in the conversation this evening than leaders of the highest caliber in Linda McMahon. I have to say, Linda she's the chair of the board of AFPI. I should probably read this. I apologize. I don't like to read but I don't want to miss anything. You don't want me to read it? Okay. Well, I love your background, and you actually have admired her for her business acumen before she even hit the administration. So with that, Linda is not only the chair of the board, she's also the chair of the Center for the American Worker for America First Policy Institute. She served in President Donald Trump's cabinet as administrator of the Small Business Administration. At SBA, McMahon reimagined the organization. She focused on rural development and championing women, entrepreneurs, and military veterans, and I can't even tell you how all 3 of those impact our state. And now, be personal, really me. This is fantastic. I'm not a veteran, but I'm married to one, and all of those things are, I see the impact of the work you did every day as I travel through the state. So thank you for that. She oversaw natural disaster recovery efforts and helped improve the ways SBA connected businesses on capital, consuling, and government contracts. After her service in the Trump administration, she went on to serve as chair of the America First Action Super PAC, the America First Policy LLC, and prior to her career in public service, McMahon was the co-founder, president, and later the CEO of the World Wrestling Entertainment. And Carla introduced herself, Ambassador Sands, I apologize. Ambassador Sands introduced herself a little bit to you, but I want to go a little bit deeper, and I am so sorry. She is from Camp Hill. Everybody knows where Camp Hill is. It's right across the river. And she serves, as she mentioned, she serves as the vice chair of the Center for Energy and Environment and the chair for the Pennsylvania State Chapter. I could not do this without her. She calls me and asks, "What do you need?" And that is the best thing that a chair can do. She previously was appointed to President Donald J. Trump's Economic Advisory Council, and in 2017, President Trump called on her to represent the United States as ambassador to Denmark, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands. During her tenure, Denmark increased its defense spending, while U.S. exports to the Kingdom of Denmark rose more than 43%, creating additional jobs at home. In January 2021, she received the Department of Defense's highest civilian honor, the Medal of Distinguished Public Service, for her work to increase security in the High North while countering Russia and China. Before her time in the Trump administration, she was the first woman to serve as chairman and CEO of Vintage Capital Group in 2015. She studied biology and chemistry at Indiana University of Pennsylvania and Elizabethtown College before receiving her doctorate of chiropractic degree from Life Chiropractic College. Ambassador Sands was the third generation of her family to practice chiropractic in Pennsylvania, and she is the best state chapter chair in AFPI. Ladies, they're now going to have a fireside chat and solve all the problems of energy in Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mary. I'm so honored to have you. You're the amazing Linda McMahon. Do we have any WWE fans in the room? All right, right here. You had a nice exit there, too, with that deal. So we had WrestleMania come to Philadelphia earlier this year. I don't know if anyone in the room was able to attend that event, but that was incredible. Thank you. And I've been thrilled to go to WrestleMania with you. Yeah, you're amazing. Brooke Rollins has built AFPI as a battle tank for 100 years, she says. We are now the anchor tenant at the Willard Hotel. We've taken the two top floors. So we are working actively to get ready, right, and to get good policies in Washington, D.C., under the leadership of our chairman of the board, Linda McMahon, who also runs the Center for the American Worker. So, Linda, let's start by talking about the economy, something you know a little bit about. Everybody in this room and everyone in Pennsylvania and in America is suffering under this current administration with the policies. We certainly aren't enjoying the same economy that we had in 2019, are we? We have higher costs across the board, higher interest rates. For the first time ever, the majority of Americans can't afford to buy their first house, a new house. And our critical industries like manufacturing are suffering. So Linda, what has been the impact of Bidenomics, both nationally and in Pennsylvania?
Thank you, Carla. It's really nice to be on your home turf, to see you in action and to meet your wonderful family. Thank you all for coming today and to meet so many of the representatives from both sides. So we really appreciate your taking the time to come out and be with us. And Mary, thank you for the awesome job that you are doing heading up our state chapter, because we know how critical Pennsylvania is in this election. No president has won the presidency without winning Pennsylvania. So that's how critical it is for our state chapters, for everything that we're doing on the ground here with our fearless leader, Carla Sands. And I first met Carla when you were the ambassador to Denmark and when I was in the cabinet. So we've known each other now for a bit, and she's dynamic, don't you agree? She's just awesome.
You're very kind.
So I think if I were going to respond to the impact of Bidenomics, I think enough is said when the man who invented the term doesn't want to use it anymore. President Biden doesn't reference Bidenomics anymore because it has been an absolute and utter failure. As we see, you referenced, Carla, a bit, the rise in inflation. And he will absolutely say with a straight face, it was 9% when he took office. And I would look at him, if I were sitting across from him, and I were the journalist asking about that, I would have to respond to him, and sir, you've actually said that with a straight face. And I don't know if he just really believes it, or he just needs to parrot that information. But clearly, when he came into office, inflation was at 1.4%. Gas prices were across the nation about 50% less than what they are now. Food prices have gone up over 20% in the state of Pennsylvania and about 51% across the country since President Biden took office. These are unsustainable factors in our economy. We just cannot continue with that. Jobs are being lost. Manufacturing jobs are still continuing to be sent overseas, if they are sent at all, because we've slowed down so much with what we're doing. President Biden has made it harder for the American workforce to grow by not sponsoring or supporting apprenticeships, by making it harder for students who are trying to get an education, though he wants to forgive student loans, but still focuses a great deal on four-year colleges. And hey, I am not opposed. I am a supporter of higher education across the board for those industries and businesses that need that kind of education. But I think we've lost our way, Carla, in not sponsoring more trade schools, more technology schools. We need to have the training for these students as they leave school. They'll have a job. And when I served for a brief time on the State of Connecticut Board of Education, and one of the things that I tried to talk so much to the industries in Connecticut were, what is it you need? How can we help structure the curriculum at Sacred Heart University so that we are providing the kind of education for the jobs that are needed? I don't think we're stressing that enough, and Bidenomics doesn't want to go near any of that. So I think in every sector almost that we would look at, Bidenomics has failed. I think we need to go back to an economy that was structured under the Trump administration of lower taxes, lower regulations. Let's make sure that we can help our businesses grow, that we can train our not only our young people coming out of school, but reskilling and training workers whose jobs are being displaced by the growth of technology. So a lot to do. I think we were doing it well under the Trump administration, and please God, let us have another run at it.
Yes, from your lips to God's ears. During the last administration, you mentioned that we had about 1.4% inflation. We were all doing okay, and wages were actually catching up with inflation. We saw that everything cost less during the last administration, and we saw that the worker salaries not only were growing, but that businesses were hiring, new businesses were forming. We had the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act under the Trump administration. As SBA administrator, you saw how these policies, the Trump policies, spurred the economy and caused really an explosion of growth. It was a great time to be in business during the Trump administration. Now, you traveled to all 50 states and you had 68 district offices. What were some of the things you heard from small business owners across the country that we can take home here in Pennsylvania?
It was, first of all, it was one of the honors of a lifetime to serve the cabinet of the President of the United States. Never dreaming, little girl from North Carolina would wind up in the cabinet, and I'll just take a moment of personal privilege, if I may, just to say, that first cabinet meeting and you're sitting there and you're looking around the table and there's there's a Secretary of State, there's a Secretary of Defense, a Secretary of the Treasury. My God, that's the President of the United States and the Vice President and me. And it was really kind of an unbelievable feeling, to be there. And so you really do feel you're honored to be there, and you feel such a responsibility for the job and the task that you've been given. And so when I really traveled around the country and visited all of the SBA district offices, and I would visit small businesses that were around there because I wanted to hear what those businesses had to say. So not only did I want to hear what the district office was telling me, but I really wanted to hear from those businesses. And when I visited, we were really talking to them about the tax cuts that were being proposed and the deregulation that President Trump was really putting on the table. And he charged every agency, for every new regulation you put into place, you must get rid of at least 2. We wound up most of the time, in most all agencies, getting rid of at least 8 to 10, and sometimes multiples of that, which really did grow our economy, taking that regulatory burden off the back of our businesses. Not only small businesses, but big business as well. But small businesses in particular don't have the resources to be able to hire, accountants and lawyers to go through all of the regs and to file all of the different complexities of tax law. So these really are burdensome on small businesses. And the thing about Donald Trump was that he really did understand the power of small business. In fact, when he was president-elect and he asked me to come to Trump Tower to talk to me about SBA. I didn't know why I was going. He said, look, I really want somebody to run the Small Business Administration who's actually built a business. Can you imagine? Who understands when you're talking to small businesses and they're talking about tax burdens and regulatory burdens, you know what they're talking about. And I absolutely did. And when I talked to a lot of these businesses and I explained to them, I said, look, I feel your pain. I went bankrupt one time. I lost everything I had. My house was auctioned off. My car was repossessed in the driveway when I was pregnant with our second child. And so I feel what you're going through, and I understand it, and that's why I want to be your champion as we talk about tax cuts and regulatory reform. And it was amazing what we were able to accomplish. And I'll tell you a little story about a baker just outside of Boston, a bread baker. Now, he was a big bread baker. He wasn't turning out 3 or 4 loaves a day, but he was a massive bread baker, and he produced white label branding for a lot of stores like Trader Joe's, other private groceries across the country. And I was asking him, I said, under the Tax Cut and Jobs Plan, President Trump is advocating this. One of the tenets of that tax plan was that you would be able to write off the same year that you invested capital into one of your businesses. So how will that impact you? And he said, I can expand today with a huge new oven. He said, that oven will cost $1 million. He said, but you see this whole empty room over here? And I was in his bakery at the time, obviously. He said, that's already dedicated space for when I can bring in that oven. And I already have the accounts that I could start baking this bread for. And I'm going to hire X many more workers, to get that done. And he said, and the reason I'll be able to do that is reinvesting the savings that I have from the write-off of this oven, because I can write it off this year. And it makes it possible then for to get the loan to do it, and also to write it off and to hire the folks. So that was a clear-cut example of what those tax cuts, would do. And today, from the National Bureau of Small Businesses, they're telling me now that their optimism level is so low. They're not starting new businesses. They're not reinvesting because they don't know where the tax laws are going to be, what the regulatory environment is going to be. And so we're seeing this slowdown in growth, in small businesses. And so I'm very concerned about that. So Bidenomics, it ain't working.
No, and the regulatory uncertainty is affecting the energy sector as well. They just don't know the next shoe to drop. If you think about the pause for exports that just recently happened. So manufacturing is one of Pennsylvania's biggest industries after farming and energy. Pennsylvania Steel was the first steel company in the nation. We have U.S. Steel, Bethlehem Steel. We have the first oil ever pulled out of the ground here in Pennsylvania in Titusville. And I've been to Titusville. It's a wonderful place full of really wonderful, wonderful people. We have over 500,000 jobs in the manufacturing sector here in Pennsylvania. But many of these towns have collapsed over the decades. Now, what's the America First approach to building up our manufacturing base? And how do you think that contrasts to what we're seeing now?
Well, I think, first of all, we have to try to get to the root of the problem of why we're losing these manufacturing jobs. It's too expensive in many ways to do business here in our country. It's unfortunate. I was at a dinner last night, and I was sitting next to a gentleman that's in the technology sector, and he was really proud of the fact that all of their jobs are here in this country, that they didn't follow suit of sending so many of the jobs of the service side of the technology to India or to other areas, that they kept them all here in the United States. But he talked about how difficult that was, how difficult it was to train those people and to attract those people into the business. And the cost of labor was so much cheaper outside of the United States that it does make it really very, very hard to attract, those kinds of employees and to train them and to skill them, in our country. So I think we have to look at that. What is the reason behind that? And then how can we train and reskill better? I mentioned a little bit before about the four-year colleges versus the trade schools, but that's incredibly real. We don't have enough welders in our country. We'll get ready to build a big project here. And I was just talking to some of the representatives here in Pennsylvania, building big projects. Do we have enough welders to be able to do that, or do we have to import them? Not from another state, sometimes from China, to get them into this country because we're not training enough welders here in our country. So I think we have to take a look at where are the gaps. And under the Trump administration, we had robust apprenticeship programs, and I participated in that at SBA, and we would go to different industries, and they actually signed a pledge as to how many apprenticeship programs that they would build over the next year. And we had, I can't remember the exact number, but it was in the millions that over the next 5 to 10 years, big companies and small companies would make a pledge to put into process these apprenticeship programs. And when the new administration came in, unfortunately, it just stopped. So we just have to get back to reskilling, retraining, making the economy able to grow, having the right tax programs, the right tax incentives for companies to invest.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about energy development. So we know it's essential to our economic success, but also our national security. And it's something that impacts everybody. You mentioned big business, then there's small business, there's families and households. It's also the second largest industry in Pennsylvania. And we are a key center for innovation, energy innovation, but we also have the Utica and Marcellus shales. And so we're the second largest gas producer in the nation, right after Texas. And what we've seen from the Biden administration and Governor Shapiro has been, I think, the opposite of what we need. We have the LNG pause. Probably many of you read about that a few months ago from the Biden administration, where our allies want to buy our energy, and he's saying we're not going to build more of those terminals. And there's a focus on the so-called green energy, where this, going green, so-called green, is really dirty, and it involves rare earth minerals that China controls, and the Chinese Communist Party is our greatest adversary. We've been canceling pipelines. We've had, many of our elected officials have championed these pipelines, and they've been killed. And it's the cheapest and cleanest way to transport energy. And then they're introducing new energy taxes. So what are some of the harms that you're seeing from these administrations and how they're impacting the American worker?
Well, when you suddenly put a cap on new ports that can be built, and you're experiencing that right here in Pennsylvania. In fact, I was talking to Representative Martina. You must be sitting here somewhere. And we were talking about Chester. and not being able to move forward. I think I have these facts right. Please jump up and tell me if I'm wrong. And Chester is vitally in need of this port, and how many jobs would be brought in, and some of the studies that have already been done, that it would bring about 30,000 new workers, into Chester, and the economy, in the billions of dollars that would be growing, and it's just stymied, just because we have this cap now on building a new port, when the resources are here to export, and I do not believe that is a defense position to take. I think it's strictly political. I think it is to satisfy the green energy base that this president today is looking at, and those are the kinds of things that are just causing us not to be able to grow, and it's impacting Pennsylvania, and this is symptomatic, of other areas in our country. And I'm sure you've heard President Trump say many, many times before, we have liquid gold beneath our feet, and let's get it and use it because it is here, and we are now buying oil from other countries to, as you were referencing, to bring into our country inferior product that costs us more, to refine and to use. And not only that, adds to the coffers of adversaries, not improving our own economy. It seems like such a common sense thing to utilize our own resources. For the life of me, other than that it is a political statement, I don't see why we're not doing that. And I would like to see it for Pennsylvania. Let's develop more of those ports along the Delaware River. Let's utilize what we have today to grow the Commonwealth and to grow our country.
I agree. And, when it comes to bad policies and how it affects us in the wallet and in our personal life, if you just look at the Trump administration and the money, the trillions of dollars that they've shoveled at the green energy projects, you could just think about EVs and these electric charging stations. Well, Pete Buttigieg, now, first of all, do you want an EV? And can you afford an EV? And then Pete Buttigieg was just on TV talking about how the government is building EV charging stations. But as a matter of fact, over 2 years and billions of dollars, they've built 8 charging stations. That's government in action. So thinking about the perversity of that and these terrible programs, tell me a little bit about what the transition project that we're working on at AFPI, getting good policies at the state level and the federal level so we can thrive and not throw away our hard-earned money. Linda.
Well, just to tag up for a second on the EV situation, when we're talking about shipping jobs overseas, there are fewer parts to an electric engine than there are to a gas engine, and so what's going to happen to all of those jobs that are now that would be in the manufacturing section here in our country? More and more of those will go outside of the United States, and you would think that the local unions who are constantly, say they're supporting, the manufacturing element, well, there's a clear example of how they're not standing up, for their own union employees, because those jobs clearly are not going to be here in our country, and they're going to be exported with more and more of electric vehicles and other electric motors, as well. I'm not saying to stand in the way of progress, but let's understand the impact of what we're looking at. That one stat of having only 8 charging stations, and they claim they're going to have 500,000 by 2030. Now that's 6 years. Over 2 years, they've done 8. Now you do the math on that. There's Bidenomics at work for sure, because somebody doesn't have their math right. Or they're just trying to pull the wool over our eyes, and the American people are too smart for that. So as we get ready, we know, first of all, we have to win in November. But as we get ready for that project, how are we going to govern in 2025? And I'm really prayerful and hopeful that we will have the opportunity to govern in 2025. So part of what AFPI started about 2.5 years ago was to get ready for the transition of one administration to the next. And SBA was one of the smallest agencies to take a look at. So it was kind of the prototype of how to approach each agency in government, from the top down or from the bottom up, every which way you wanted to look at it, but putting the right people. And we're not looking at people. We're looking at boxes of this is the operation of these agencies that we need to look at. This is what you need at the top. These are the immediate people underneath. This is what the support team needs to be. Now, after you've looked at all of that structure, what are the right policies that we need to put in place, in each of these agencies? And that's what AFPI has been working on. What can we do through executive orders? We have almost 300, I think, or more now. I think it's about 300 drafted already for the president to sign on day one. Now, they're in various stages. Have they been legally vetted? All of the different stages of the vetting process. But we will have, hopefully, closer to 500. But we right now have about 300, 350. And a gentleman in our shop, James Shirk, who was in that position in the former White House, has been, I don't think he sleeps. He's just a madman. But he's got a great team working with him to help develop these executive orders, as well as the policies that we will be able to put forth. Let's just make the Tax Cut and Jobs policy, let's make it permanent. Now, that's pretty easy. Let's just do that. And some of the aspects of the tax policy are already starting to expire. The one I referenced about being able to write off that capital expenditure, parts of it are expiring this year or have expired. And then it'll go more into the regular amortization plan, which will just continue to stymie more. So as we look at the transition project, and it is a massive undertaking, if you think about all of the agencies of the federal government that are just being looked at from top to bottom, and we have almost 700 volunteers who are working with us and have been working with us through this period of time, who come out of those agencies in the prior administration and looking at it and saying, okay, these are the things we found that weren't effective. Let's move those out of the way. How do you fire people that are ineffective? I mean, it's the most astounding thing to me coming from the private sector when I went into government, that you couldn't fire anybody. And you move them on to some other part of the agency, so you just continue to reroute incompetency from one area to the other. And we just need to be better than that and be more efficient at that in government. How do we downsize, different government agencies? What are the real rules that we need to put into place? And then getting the policy ready, as I mentioned, getting the policies that can start in states and move into the federal level as well, or vice versa. It's such a massive undertaking. And I've been looking at the big sort of manual that is being developed that are including all of the different agencies, and it's about this thick with the tiniest little type you ever saw. But it talks about the structure and what do we need? Do we need people from the private sector? And how do we actually get to govern on day one? Now, I went into SBA green, from the private sector, but green to government, and I would have been so happy to have had what will be in place for each agency that will talk about, this is what your agency is about. These are the people that you need. These are the people that you don't need. This is what rules apply to you. This is the union part of the house that you need to work with. All of those different aspects. And here's like a manual this thick on all the acronyms that there are, so you know what people are talking about half the time. But it is so important to have that. And in addition to that, AFPI is offering training sessions for new people coming into the administration, as well as those who have been seasoned. And I'm going to participate, I think it's the third week of June 24, 25, and 26, I think it is, in the full training program for seasoned executives who've already been in the administration. And I'm really looking forward to that because I'll actually get to see this whole process, at work. And the differences that it will mean to the people who are coming in. So Democrats have always been far ahead of us on this kind of a thing. But you know what? We're not going to be caught flat-footed this time. We've been at it now for 2.5 years, and there are other organizations that are working as well, some vetting people, some vetting other aspects of it. So we believe that, together we will have the best operation going forward for a new administration. So I'm really excited about it. Thanks for asking about that, Carla.
Absolutely. And ambassadors could fire, Linda. We could fire. I just want to say...
You were the lucky ones.
Yes, sometimes. Just want to say how thrilled I am to kick off America First Policy Institute here in Pennsylvania. If you're interested in working on the election and getting involved there, please go to AmericaFirstWorks.com, AmericaFirstWorks.com. We even have a Telegram channel you can sign up for. And could we just all put our hands together and thank Linda McMahon for joining us this evening?
I'm feeling pretty motivated, and I'm definitely more motivated than I was, 6 months ago. So I want to can we do one more round of applause for Ambassador Sands and Linda McMahon? Thank you both so much for being with us, and Carla, thank you for your leadership. Well, before I move on to the program, because we've got a great panel coming as they're setting it up here, I want to talk just a little bit about Pennsylvania energy. Carla mentioned it in her comments that you can't push Pennsylvania forward without the power that's beneath our feet. We were the first, in addition to having the first well in Pennsylvania, we led the way by having the first pipe of natural gas to homes for commercial use. Pennsylvania led nuclear innovation with the first full-scale nuclear power plant, and Pittsburgh holds the distinction of being the first city with electricity supplied by atomic power. I didn't know that at the time when I was preparing my research. Yeah, shout out to you. There you go. Okay. More than a decade ago, and this is one of the reasons I live in Pennsylvania now, is because a little more than 10 years ago, they found Marcellus Shale, 95,000 square miles. That's twice the size of Arkansas, of Marcellus Shale, right under our feet. Well, maybe not under our feet, but you may go a little bit further. Am I right there? Okay, over in their neighborhood, over there. Where I live in Clinton County, we have all kinds of Marcellus Shale under us. Lying a few thousand feet below that was the Utica Shale. It's approximately 170,000 square miles. That's the size of California. I mean, just think about that for a minute. It just blows my mind. Why are we importing gas and oil from other places when it's right here? Now, that stretches from Quebec down to our friends in West Virginia. But my goodness, there's so much there. And in that as well are critical minerals. And that's something that we're going to be talking a lot about in the coming months. I think I've talked to quite a few of you about that already. Very excited. In 2012, the U.S. Geological Survey estimated that the Utica Shale contains 940 billion, with a B, barrels of oil and 208 million barrels of liquid natural gas. So ask yourself, when we have the Saudi Arabia of natural gas right here in Pennsylvania, why aren't we powering the world? Because that's what we should be doing. So without further ado, we have an amazing panel for you tonight to really dig into these issues. Our moderator for today's panel is Dr. Oliver McPherson-Smith. He is originally from Sydney, Australia, and serves as director for the Center of Energy and Environment at AFPI. Dr. McPherson-Smith earned a PhD in political science from the University of Oxford, a master's degree in Middle Eastern Studies from Harvard University, and a bachelor's degree on land economy from the University of Cambridge. His research has been published in several leading academic journals, and he maintains fluency in French, Russian, and Spanish. Before his research career, Dr. McPherson-Smith worked as a television correspondent in Africa and Europe. And don't let that accent fool you, and we won't hold it against him. He lives in Texas. I also want to welcome Senator Camara Bartolato. She brings an entrepreneurial spirit and a wealth of real-world experience to her job representing residents of Beaver County, Greene, and Washington counties. She's a longtime resident of Monongahela. Did I say that? Get it? No? Okay, sorry, I butchered it. I practiced. I really did practice. She was elected for her first term representing the 46th senatorial district in 2014. She was reelected in 2018 and 22. She currently serves as part of the Senate Republican leadership team as the Majority Caucus Secretary. During her time in the Senate, Camara has authored many new laws, including measures to help judges keep the most dangerous domestic violence offenders behind bars, improve the availability of job training programs throughout the state, ease the strain of farmers and food supply, and protect Pennsylvania's freshwater supplies by ensuring the safe use of treated mine water in oil and gas operations. She co-chairs the Senate Gas and Oil Caucus, and as a bipartisan legislative body that focuses on issues impacting the gas and oil industry, with the goal of promoting policies resulting in a positive future for the constituents, the business community, and the state economy. Senator, thank you for coming. My neighbor, Representative Joe Ham of Pennsylvania's 84th District, which includes Lycoming and Sullivan counties. He currently serves on House Judiciary, Veteran Affairs and Emergency Preparedness, Environmental Resources and Energy, and Game and Fishery Committees. He graduated with a bachelor's degree in political science and government from Lock Haven University and minors in business, psychology, and leadership studies. And we have Representative Josh Kale of Pennsylvania's 15th District, which includes Beaver and Washington counties, right there by the senator. His district shares a border with Ohio and West Virginia. Rep. Kale is a chair of the House Republican Policy Committee and sits on the House Rules Committee. Prior to running for office, he exercised his skills as an attorney representing small and mid-sized businesses. He supported local communities as a solicitor and worked with Beaver County's children and youth. And one of my favorite people since I started working in this role, David Taylor. He's the president and CEO of Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. It's a statewide trade organization representing the manufacturing sector in Pennsylvania's public policy process. Taylor is the association's chief spokesman at the Capitol and in the media. He serves as the editor of the PMA Bulletin and host of the statewide television program PMA Perspective. He's also on, that's on the Pennsylvania Cable Network. He hosts Capitol Watch, a twice monthly news and commentary program on Lincoln Radio Journal, which is heard on more than 90 radio stations across Pennsylvania. He's a native of Huntington, Pennsylvania, a graduate of Dickinson College, where he majored in history and the dramatic arts. And if you don't keep a good read on what he's putting out there, big mistake. He oozes information. So enjoy your panel.
Thank you very, very much, Mary, and thank you, Ambassador Sands and Chair McMahon, for kicking us off. I want to pick up on manufacturing because I really enjoyed the first discussion there. One of the amazing things about the Trump administration and its America First policies was that not only did wages across the board raise, but on the factory floor, workers' wages raised faster and higher than managers. It really put the working American people first. Unfortunately, however, under Bidenomics, it's a different reality. So I want to turn to you, David, first and foremost, to get a pulse on manufacturing here in the Commonwealth.
Well, thank you. As was mentioned, manufacturing is about 500,000 jobs on the plant floor. It's $100 billion of value added every year. And manufacturing is critical to the well-being of our economy and our society because manufacturing is the sector that adds the most value. And as a result, manufacturing jobs have the best wages and benefits in the marketplace. So these are family-sustaining jobs for working people. Manufacturing also has the strongest multiplier effect on job creation. So it's not just what happens on the plant floor, it's all of the supply chain and distribution network and the vendors of industrial services. So I mean, I'd say that the manufacturing sector, here in the Commonwealth has continued to, to move forward, but as is usually the case, at a pace slower than the national average. There are a number of challenges. I think the foremost one is the workforce crisis. And certainly there are things that our friends at the federal level could do to de-stupidize the job training and workforce development system that, because of federal strings that are attached, it's dozens of programs across multiple cabinet departments. If we were able to give the states flexibility to reinvent how those dollars are deployed, it would make a lot more sense, be a lot more effective. In Pennsylvania, I'm convinced that there are hundreds of millions of dollars of efficiencies to be found.
De-stupidize, they're using the technical term. Yeah. Love it. So there are a variety of different pathways forward out of the quagmire that we're in at the moment. And one way forward that's been proposed is that of Governor Shapiro. So I want to talk about energy for a moment here. Governor Shapiro has proposed earlier this year the 35% by 2035 renewable energy standard for the state. He's also proposed a cap and trade system for electricity generation. Now, instead of exporting natural gas, it sounds like the governor is looking to import California's energy policy. California, that has some of the highest electricity prices. California, where the cap and trade system has added 27 cents on the gallon. That's according to the state of California. They're not my numbers. So I want to turn to some of our elected representatives. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'll start with you, Madam Senator. Tell us, what is your read of Governor Shapiro's plan, and what's the way forward?
Well, recently I spoke with Toby Rice, who is the president of EQT, and he literally goes all around the world talking about energy and natural gas and exporting freedom. That's exactly what we should be doing, because as has been said many times, Pennsylvania is one of the largest producers of natural gas. We could be producing 4 times what we're doing right now if it weren't for overregulation, permit debacles, DEP, which I lovingly call Department of Economic Prevention, or don't expect a permit. There are issues that we have. We literally keep putting up stumbling blocks in front of every industry, but in particular the energy industry. And when the cap and trade program that you talked about, it's called RGGI, Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, and Shapiro was campaigning early on and was saying to the environmentalists, yes, we absolutely need to do that. We've got to, make them pay their fair share. And to the industry, to our great trade unions, oh, no, we can't have that, we can't have that. So he was elected, and he said, let the courts decide. Let the courts decide. It was in the Supreme Court. Well, they decided it was unconstitutional, as we said it would be. He's appealing it. So how do you encourage capital investment to the tune of billions and billions and billions of dollars and tens of thousands of great jobs if the sands are shifting all the time? You have nowhere to stand firmly. No one's going to do that. We're losing industry, and we're also, with that threat, the cost of energy has increased a lot since he was elected. And not only that, but because of the Biden administration making these projections of, the pause on exporting natural gas, the moratorium on that, it's just been a disaster all the way around. Lastly, with the Governor Shapiro saying 30% reduction, I heard 40% to go green, reduction in carbon by 2032. That is going to double or triple the cost of energy in Pennsylvania in a very short number of years. It's going to be here before you know it. And everyone bases their expansion on what's happening in years to come. When they hear that the industry, any industry coming to Pennsylvania, will be beaten like a piñata to pay for an excessive cost of energy, no one is coming to Pennsylvania. It is a disaster waiting to happen, and we're already seeing a lot of that. Nobody wants to invest in Pennsylvania. It is a lose, lose, lose for everyone.
You know, David, we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, but Governor Shapiro seems to be the best governor Ohio and West Virginia have ever had. Because if you're looking to invest, go there. Please.
Sad to say, and it's again that in a free country, in a free economy, private sector investment decisions are voluntary, and that that the General Assembly can't pass a law compelling people to invest in the Commonwealth and hire and operate and expand here. We need to make it the smart business decision for people to choose to come here, and that Pennsylvania's energy opportunity is one of the most powerful tools that we have to help bring that future forward. Pennsylvania has a competitive market for electricity. It was time-consuming and expensive to get there, but it has been a real policy victory for Pennsylvania, a victory for consumers, and of course our manufacturers consume large amounts of energy, and so this has been a net positive. And that the governor's plan is to overthrow our competitive market for electricity, to give away half the market to sources of his choosing, and that the problem is that several of those sources do not exist. That, the governor's plan is complete science fiction, and that I want to see the governor's office and the lawmakers sponsoring those bills to say which energy source is going to provide how much electricity by what point in time, because fusion technology hasn't been invented, that small modular nuclear does not exist in this country, in the private economy. The most recent one that was scheduled was in Idaho for 2030, but the financing broke down. So these technologies will not be in place to meet his mandate by the point in time. It's complete madness, and it needs to stop.
So amid the madness, let's turn to Reps Kale and Ham. What's a sensible way forward?
Yeah, I think where we got to start for an elected official, especially one that's running statewide, like Governor Shapiro, like President Trump is start with the premise that the world is a better place with Pennsylvania energy. We need energy policy that celebrates, that leverages, that gets the most out of our own natural resources. And it's a better place not just for our jobs in Pennsylvania. The Department of Energy came out with a study a couple years ago during the Trump administration that said there's upwards of 200,000 potential manufacturing jobs in Western Pennsylvania, Eastern Ohio, Panhandle of West Virginia because of the natural gas resources that we have here. And there's items that we need to follow through with in order for that to happen. There's incredible opportunity for jobs. It's also great for consumers, lower costs and goods for our families. With dealing with inflation, lower energy costs is so critical. It's great for our national security. We need to be energy independent, but it's also great for our allies. As Senator Bartolotta was talking about, we need to be energy dominant. Why is Europe dependent on Russia for natural gas when we have all of the energy that we can give them or sell to them right here? And finally, and this is a point that I think we need to be talking more and more about. And overall, it's one of the reasons why I really appreciate President Trump's energy policy, because he did celebrate American energy. He did celebrate Pennsylvania energy. But the final positive that we need to talk about often as well is it's good for our environment. It's good for our environment. Pennsylvania's natural gas is the cleanest natural gas in the world. It's the cleanest form of reliable energy in the world. If we want to get serious about reducing carbon emissions, we have to start doing things in America, in Pennsylvania. Our green tariffs, that I call them, the green policies that Governor Shapiro puts into place, that President Biden's putting into place, is doing nothing more than driving demand for Chinese pollution. And if we want to cut down that demand, what we have to do is start making goods again in Pennsylvania, start making goods again in America. And here in Pennsylvania, there are certain steps that we certainly could be taking. There's steps at the state level, like technical tax provisions, our net operating loss provisions, our permitting that Senator Bartolotta talked about, our energy policy, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, not punishing our manufacturers, the cleanest manufacturers in the world, and not driving demand for Chinese pollution. There's all kinds of things that we could do, but we have to start with the premise. As elected officials, that the world is a better place with Pennsylvania energy. And this idea that we're transitioning to renewables, I just don't buy it. I don't think we're in an energy transition. I think we're in an energy reformation. I think we're going to start talking more about carbon capture and future uses of fossil fuels and things like that. But this concept of a transition away from fossil fuels, and we should be ashamed of it, and we should be doing everything we can to step away, it's nonsense. We need to own it. We need to get the most out of it. We need to celebrate it, and we need to make a world a better place using it.
Yeah, we need to unleash Pennsylvania energy. And with that, we secure America energy independence. And look, the opportunity we have in here in Pennsylvania is limitless. And I was having a conversation with Oliver last night and then again today about the fact that, Pennsylvania right now is second in the nation for natural gas production. But there's no reason we shouldn't be number one. We could surpass Texas easily if we had regulatory reform, if we got permits out the door, if we had government out of the way. That's what we need to do. So we need to unleash Pennsylvania energy. We got to get pipelines in the ground. We got to get natural gas to market. And there are plenty of customers who want Pennsylvania natural gas. Boston would love to have Pennsylvania natural gas. And we've got to get it, to Europe, to Boston. Hundreds of thousands of jobs in this Commonwealth, directly and indirectly, are impacted by the natural gas industry. And so we have an opportunity to provide good paying jobs right here in this Commonwealth. And let's talk about the opportunity it's provided for our small family farms. So many farms were on the brink. They were talking about being done. 2010 timeframe, after a recession hit, things were really bleak for our farmers. And it was the natural gas industry that came here and saved a lot of family farms. Many farmers who were able to continue to operate today because of the industry. And so there is so much opportunity with the industry for Pennsylvania, but also for this nation and for our world. So we just got to do more to push back against the regulatory agencies, against permits being held hostage, and we've got to unleash Pennsylvania energy.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about farming because natural gas is one of the largest single price inputs to fertilizers. When prices go up, when there's an absence of supply, you see the prices trickle through the economy across farms, but also in your local supermarket. It runs the gamut. So let's talk about pushing back on bad policy, especially at the federal level. One of the beautiful things about our federal system is that the federal government and the states can keep each other in check. And we've seen fantastic leadership. I'm a new Texan, so I'm going to say it. Out of Texas, Attorney General Paxton, fantastic job in holding the Biden administration and its wayward policies to account. We've seen leadership come out of West Virginia, push back against the EPA. What can America First leaders here in the Commonwealth do to push back and hold the federal government to account, Madam Senator?
Well, just today there was an article that came out. There were 20 Republican governors who came out en masse railing against the Biden policies, against the EPA mandates, against the pause on exporting natural gas, on all sorts of the pipelines, a long list. And every one of those demands made perfect sense to anyone who understands energy production, use, and the way that affects the economy. But 20 Republican governors, we know that our governor's not going to be on that list. We know that. But we need to really keep the pressure on all of that messaging. We cannot be beholden to OPEC. We should not be dependent on any other foreign energy at all. There is no reason for it except to make America weaker. That is not our job as Americans, as legislators, as citizens. We need to keep America strong, and we need to put America first. And the best way to do that is with a strong American energy policy. I have a pen that says American energy, American jobs for a reason. It's also American security and American freedom. And that's what we should be all focusing on at this moment in time, because it is a dangerous world out there. And when we are beholden to Russia for natural gas and to OPEC and Saudi Arabia for oil, we are in big trouble.
I think it's also important to note that today is the 35th anniversary of the massacre at Tiananmen Square, where the dictatorship in Beijing murdered thousands of citizens, college kids, who were protesting, demanding freedom. And that the communist gangsters in Beijing view energy correctly as an instrument of national power. This is why that dictatorship has committed to dominating the supply chain for solar panels, wind turbines, EV batteries. That it really comes down to American energy versus Chinese energy, and that with this so-called energy transition, we are being invited to join a race where we could run out of road. And that being dependent on a foreign power for technologies that we do not control the industrial inputs, it's foolhardy in the extreme. And we've already had enough economic and geopolitical damage to America's standing based on being naive about Beijing's intentions.
So I think something that American First elected officials and candidates and people in general, the base that we've seen now within our party, I would say, look, we got to get serious about winning elections. We got to start doing nuts and bolts, blocking and tackling, and winning elections. And at our level, at the state house level, that means getting after it, getting out there, recruiting candidates from day one. It means, raising resources, of course, for us. But at the committee levels, it means organizing. Because, the difference between Texas's Attorney General and Pennsylvania's Attorney General, there is one very stark difference in the party that they're with. And if we don't get serious about actually winning elections, it's fine for us to be out there and talking about it and to say the right things. But unless we win certain positions and win majorities in the state house and maintain majorities in the state senate, it's just going to be a voice out there that's not going to be able to effectuate any actual change. So what it boils down to is we need to understand how serious of a moment that we are in right now, how serious Pennsylvania is as the tip of the spear for the tug of war between the right and the left. And we need to get out there and get after it like our children's lives depend on it, because they do.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's simple. We shouldn't depend on foreign countries for much of anything. America First means looking to our own and protecting our own and supporting our communities. We have it right here in Pennsylvania. We have it in Texas. And so we can do everything we need to do right here in America. And so we've got to turn our focus to doing better and making sure that we provide our children the opportunity that we've had here in America and to be able to realize the American dream. And that all starts with America First.
So something that Ambassador Sands said earlier today was that energy security is national security. And I'm sure Ambassador Sands saw it during her service in Europe. We saw Europe being beholden to Russian energy imports. If you just look at the statistics, our dear friends in Europe have been the single largest purchaser of Russian energy since the beginning of the war in Ukraine. Since then, not before, but since then. And here in the United States, we need to be more forward-looking and think about how we can protect our own nation to avoid that kind of situation, not only in energy commodities, but also broader commodities, things like critical minerals, for example, for which, unfortunately, the Chinese Communist Party and the gangsters you referenced, David, have control over. Tell us more how we can achieve that.
Well, yes, and again, I think it comes down to viewing American energy strength and American industrial strength as being instruments of national power and defending our national security. Ultimately, our freedom depends upon our means of defending it. And to put it in perspective, Putin's entire government depends on the sale of energy exports. He's deployed a domestic nuclear fleet to power his domestic economy so that there are more resources, more coal, more oil, more natural gas to sell into international markets. That they got the Germans dependent on cheap Russian natural gas as a means essentially of taking control of Germany's decision-making, Germany being the primary manufacturing power in Europe. And so, we should want to put our national interest first. We should want to maximize domestic energy production here in the U.S. We should want to recognize trade in particular as being something for allies. That we have been plundered by Chinese technological theft for decades, and that we've been played for chumps. It needs to stop, and the first and most important step is to defend our own interest, pursue our own interest, and in this particular case, it means maximizing domestic energy production. Absolutely.
Not only for use here in the United States, but for export as well. The Russian Federation earns it's $866 million every single day through its energy exports. Every barrel of oil that comes from Russia, that comes from Iran, that comes from Venezuela is a lost opportunity for American producers.
And if I could just please add that during the Trump administration, that the federal government pursued that American interest with great passion, and that was one of the factors that made our economy during that time the best it's ever been.
And safest.
Please, your thoughts?
Well, it's not only energy that keeps us safe and free. It's the ability to use our own resources, quadrupling them actually in the gas industry, and making not just the world a cleaner place, but right here in Pennsylvania in the last 20 years with natural gas and the technology that comes along with it, it's literally reduced emissions to the point it's like taking every car off the roads for 7 surrounding states for an entire year. That's wonderful news for our ecological friends. But when it comes to national security, it's not just national security with energy. When you can produce your own goods and not have to rely on a foreign country for Advil, for ibuprofen, for chips. Look what happened during COVID. You couldn't get cars because we couldn't have chips. There's a company in West Virginia, they can take any kind of waste carbon and create chips and other things from them. Why are we not doing that in America? We should be self-sustaining in every single way imaginable. And if we reduce the export of natural gas, if we reduce the exploration of really good, dependable energy and a solid grid, we're not going to have rolling brownouts, we're going to have rolling blackouts. And instead of reducing the need and the pressure on the grid, it's going to increase exponentially because we have data centers that are popping up everywhere. And this little thing called AI, it takes massive, massive amounts of energy. And we could provide that for those types of industries right here, right on the same property as any of those manufacturers or data centers or AI. And that's what we should be doing. We're being crippled at every level, and it starts with energy production.
Yeah, I think it really goes back to an initial point that was made here. What does this require to occur? What do we need to have happen? We need investment. So we need capital. And what drives capital? Well, capital is like water. It flows to the area of least resistance. Well, what's causing the resistance for capital to flow? Well, it's our regulatory environment. It's an administrative state in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's an administrative state in D.C. And I call the fourth headless branch of government that we've created over the last century. And it's just built up to a point where it has stifled investment because it's taken projects so long to get accomplished. There's so many hoops that you got to go through. Then, of course, what else stifles capital is tax policy. And so those two things in and of themselves, it's one of the reasons I think there was so much success within the Trump administration. What we saw during the Trump years was the focus on the regulatory reform and the focus on tax cuts. It's not rocket science. It takes political courage. There's forces that you have to overcome, of course, but it's not rocket science. I mean, capital is going to go to the place of least resistance, and we need to create an environment where there's less resistance so that we can have development and we can start extracting more energy and start manufacturing more.
Yeah, I mean, they've hit all the points there, and it's pretty simple. If we want to get serious here in Pennsylvania, then we need our governor to not talk out of both sides of his mouth. He can't tell one group one thing and another group another thing, right? We got a president who tends to talk about being for the American worker. I don't see it. He's leaving them behind. Our middle class is shrinking. People are struggling to make ends meet. And we have opportunity here in Pennsylvania. And I started with those comments, is the opportunity we have right here in this Commonwealth. We need to unleash Pennsylvania energy. And with that, we'll grow our middle class again. We will help our farmers. We'll help our middle class. We will help people make ends meet. And so bottom line is we got to get government out of the way. We got to get the bureaucrats out of the way. And we've got to unleash Pennsylvania energy.
So as Chair McMahon mentioned earlier, one of the great successes of the Trump administration was tax reform and getting government out of the way. So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the most monumental reform to our federal tax code in decades, signed into law by President Trump in late 2017, not only cut taxes for every single tax bracket, but actually generated more tax revenue, because the incredibly smart economists, I say, are also on staff at AFPI, the likes of Kevin Hassett, the chair of our academic board of overseers. They recognized that when businesses, firstly, when individuals have more money in their pocket, that's the main thing. They can spend it on what they want to spend it on. But when businesses have more money, they're able to hire additional workers, which is so important. They're able to invest in capital and expand their businesses. That generates wealth. And that produces more revenue that we can use to fund our military and to pay down our debt that is off the charts at the moment. I want to go around the circle and talk about tax reform proposals that we can use here in the Commonwealth to spur that kind of change. David, your thoughts?
Well, one of the things that's under discussion right now is getting rid of the startup penalty. The Pennsylvania tax law, when it comes to the way that we treat business losses and their application to future tax liability, Pennsylvania is an extreme outlier. We're one of only 2 states to be below the IRS level and the level in every other state. And so this is really hurting startup businesses and cyclical businesses in Pennsylvania. We have a pitifully low startup rate exactly because we're one of the only jurisdictions where investors would not be able to apply those losses when a business would finally get on its feet and become profitable again. We're an extreme outlier. That needs to be addressed in a very urgent manner.
Yeah, I would agree. Our net operating loss provisions got to be top priority if we want to see investment in manufacturing. So my district is on the border of Ohio and West Virginia. Shell Petrochemical built a $14 billion investment in my district, and so at first it was going to be $6 billion, but then I got elected and it became $14 billion. Not really. It's probably inflation actually that drove that, but. What we're finding is a lot of downstream opportunity from that plant, and there usually is within the petrochemical industry. And a lot of investors that I have spoken to have said our net operating loss provisions, what David was just talking about, the ability to carry forward your losses over years, is detrimental. And they're going to Ohio, they're going to West Virginia. So we asked the question, why are we losing to Ohio? Well, there's one of the major reasons. The other issue is, and we started this process last cycle, and we need to expedite the process of cutting our corporate net income taxes. We had one of the highest taxes in the nation at 9.9%. We've cut it since then, but it's cutting over time. And next decade, I believe it ends up at 4.9. Is that correct?
By the time that my middle schooler graduates from college, we'll have a rate as low as Indiana and South Carolina today.
And Indiana and South Carolina at that point won't have one, probably.
Correct.
Just judging by how things go. So I think we need to expedite that and hurry that up as well.
Yeah, just recently, the Senate passed some legislation to cut our state income tax from 3.07 to 2.8 and to eliminate the gross receipts tax on our energy bills. And it's hardworking Pennsylvanians who get to keep more money, more money in their paycheck, give less to government. Pennsylvania doesn't have a revenue problem $45 billion rolling into this Commonwealth. We have a priority problem. And so let's give Pennsylvanians their money back. Let's let them decide what they're going to spend it on. And let's let our small business owners invest that money back into their businesses.
Again, the corporate net income tax is huge. It's huge. And we're trying to get the governor to agree to accelerate it because that was also another campaign promise. But the net operating loss.
There were a lot of those.
Yeah, there was a whole lot of them. A whole lot. Shocking.
Bad memory.
Yeah, well, I don't know if anybody follows my Twitter, but I had some special words to say to the governor for 2 years leading up to his election about Reggie. He was riding the fence on Reggie so hard he had splinters in his. Anyhow, neither here nor there. But the net operating loss, right after COVID, I had legislation that would address just those people who were affected by closures in their businesses so they could, it was just a waiver for a short amount of time for net operating loss forward and back, just like the federal government offers to businesses. We should take advantage of that also. It would have really helped a lot of those struggling, and many of those places closed down because they couldn't keep up. But the other thing that the Republican caucus in the Senate has talked about, yes, we have a $14 billion surplus, but that's so that we have, a great bond rating with our rainy day fund being much more flush. Also, if you've got savings, in your savings account, it's because you scrimped and you saved and all of those things. If there's money in the coffers of the government, it's because we taxed you too much. You deserve to get some of that back. So the Republican Senate caucus has said, okay, we want to give $3 billion back to the taxpayers. And again, with the comments you made about those tax initiatives, that's a good way to do it. Put some money back in the pockets of people who are really suffering today. Food costs are up, 34%. Gasoline costs up 40-some%. It's just on and on and on and on. And it's inflation, but it's also, we're printing money like it means nothing. And that's pretty much what's happening to our monetary system right now. It's monopoly money. So they're asking for a whole lot more of it for every single thing that the consumers use. So if we have a surplus of $14 billion in the government, we owe it to the taxpayers to give some of that money back to them right now. And that's what we plan to do.
Sensible tax policy from your lips to God's ears, please. So often the progressive left will use the environment as an excuse to push these wayward policies. And it's a false dichotomy. They'll say that capitalism is dirty and only socialism or progressive policies will protect the environment. Well, the America First policies of the Trump administration proved that wrong, for the fact that not only did the economy grow, did wages across the board for every group, for every race, for men and women raise and go higher, we also saw our air get cleaner. Our water got demonstrably cleaner, according to the EPA. We saw our emissions fall, our energy production surge, all that while getting wealthier. It wasn't a dichotomy. We were able to have it all. I want to turn back to David to get your thoughts on that shift and that belief that capitalism is dirty and that it's not possible to have a clean environment and a booming economy.
Yeah, I mean, it's very wrong-headed, and my friend Representative Kale has said that we need to have a reality-based conversation about energy policy. That so much of what folks on the left throw at us, really, it's more like a religious fanaticism than it is based on any kind of science or objective standard. Like, I was a little kid in the 70s, and I remember when every car belched black filth into the air and people just chucked garbage out the window because they felt like it. And as has been said, the statistics show the air is cleaner than it's been since we started measuring. The water has gotten cleaner. All these things are due in great part because of the discovery and the development of the Marcellus Shale and the deployment of clean-burning Pennsylvania natural gas. And I would say, furthermore, that private ownership is what establishes responsibility. and that that the late great commentator P.J. O'Rourke said that the socialist paradigm was the public toilet, that everybody uses it but nobody's responsible for it. In a system of private ownership, there's specific responsibility, and when you have companies or entities that deliberately pollute, of course they should be caught and punished and fined. But the idea of the gotcha mentality of the regulatory state rather than being a partner in compliance, that's very wrong-headed. And that, again, we need to embrace the kind of dynamism and prosperity that can come from an accelerating economy, because only then will we be wealthy enough to be able to pay for the extra things that will make the environment even cleaner.
So, and David's been a leader on this, and being around him for the last number of years has helped me think through these issues. We need to end the false dichotomy that we have to pick between our jobs and our environment. You mentioned that there's this decision that needs to be made that whether we can manufacture and build here, or do we have to protect our environment, that the left kind of pushes forward as we go. It's actually quite the opposite. And what I mean is the only way to realistically reduce our carbon emissions is to start using Pennsylvania energy, to start using American energy. Because when we're not using American and Pennsylvanian energy, we are just simply sending our coal across the ocean to China, to Indonesia, to Russia, to Vietnam, to places like that have zero regulations on it whatsoever. And pollution carbon emission numbers have gone through the roof since we've stopped manufacturing in America. I don't hear AOC or anybody from that side of the party, from that side of the political spectrum, saying that we shouldn't be using cell phones anymore. I don't hear any of them complaining about the plastic that's on this microphone. I don't hear them complaining about computers, about cars, about stuff that they use every single day. Unless your plan is that we live in a hut or something like that and get rid of electricity production and lose 98% of our population, it is not realistic to do what they're saying we should be doing. And all that's happening is we're cloaking ourselves in green righteousness and sending the pollution overseas in China where it's being generated, and we're buying these goods and we feel good about it, but at the same time, pollution has gone through the roof. And the last time I checked, we live in the same world. The last time I checked, if we're just decreasing our ability to produce items and increasing the pollution in the net balance in China and Vietnam or Indonesia or Russia, and by the way, giving them more power over us because they're generating goods, if that's all we're doing, it's not a good thing. It might feel good. They might be able to beat their chest and say, rah, rah, I'm a green warrior. But at the end of the day, there's more emissions. And so if we really want to correct this problem, if that's what they believe is a problem, I think we need to start turning the tables on the left. We always have to field the question, well, do you take climate change seriously? I think we need to turn the tables. Do you take climate change seriously? Mm-hmm. Do you take carbon emissions being a problem seriously? Because if you did, you wouldn't be sending all of our jobs and our production over to China.
Yeah, clean, affordable, and reliable. That's Pennsylvania gas. That's Pennsylvania energy. Look, we all want to be good stewards of our environment, and our air has never been cleaner in Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Because of the gas industry. We have cut emissions by over 50% in this Commonwealth. And so, the argument that, gas is bad and that green energy is the way, it just doesn't hold up. It doesn't hold its muster. And so, bottom line is clean, affordable, reliable. That's Pennsylvania energy, and our air has never been cleaner.
One of my favorite sayings, and some of you may have seen it somewhere, maybe on a billboard, the Green New Deal is America's off switch. And that is exactly what it is. Those are not my billboards, by the way. Anyway, I hang out with a pro-energy group, and they throw quotes up. The first one was, stop the BS, you need fossil fuels to live. But I didn't BS, they shortened it. Anyway. But again, you cannot have green energy without fossil fuels. It doesn't happen. Where are we getting the majority of these solar panels? China. How many windmills does it take to make a windmill? You need steel. You need petrochemicals for the blades, which, by the way, are not recyclable. You see these huge fields of these cut-up blades, and they're just pushing dirt over them. How is that better for the environment? There are some third world countries out there where people are dying at the ripe old age of 60 in some places because they're forced to use dung to heat with and to cook with. So the indoor pollution for these is because they're not allowed to have coal. Oh, coal is dirty, can't have coal. It's absurd. It's people who aren't thinking straight. And most recently, how many of you have read recently an article that just came out about the fact that fracking wastewater is where now they're finding lithium?
Oh, yeah.
There you go. Yes, thank you. But lithium, we have it now. And guess what? You can't have lithium to power your coal car, your electric car, and all of these other things that need massive, massive batteries. We can produce lithium right here. And how do you produce it? With the gas industry. It's an offshoot of the gas industry. We'll all be darned, environmentalists. What do you think about that? So it's just every argument that they come up with. And again, to Representative Scales' point, you see protesters protesting fossil fuels and natural gas and coal. They show up in a car. Mm-hmm. They're not riding a horse and buggy. They're using cell phones, and they didn't make their clothes out of hemp. So there's an issue with hypocrisy when it comes to that.
Oh, Senator, I am so in your corner on this. And again, I want the Greens to lead the way. If they think that somehow it's possible to live without petrochemicals and hydrocarbons, show us how. Show us how. It's like, oh, you're wearing sneakers. The rubber of the soles. Did you create a canoe and paddle to Indonesia and cut down a rubber tree plant? No. Oh, that's a synthetic rubber. That's a petrochemical product. I just again, a reality-based conversation about how our modern society is upheld by our production, by our manufacturing, by our energy, all these things that make modern life clean and safe and comfortable and convenient.
Yeah, just like I'd like to see the pro-Palestinian protesters go visit Palestine.
Yeah.
Right? That would be an interesting situation. Look, I think we find ourselves once again in Pennsylvania in such a unique position. The Industrial Revolution, coal, steel, what happened here, Western Pennsylvania, across the entire Commonwealth. We changed the world. We saved the world in World War I and World War II with our production, with our ability to generate the steel for tanks. And now we find ourselves again with all the solutions to the world's problems, whether it's jobs, whether it's lower cost on energy, whether it's national security, whether it's our allies' security, whether it's our environment. Pennsylvania energy makes the world a better place. And we can once again become the keystone of this nation.
That, I think, is a fantastic note to end on. Prosperity, jobs, workers, the lot. We can do it here in Pennsylvania with these sensible America First solutions. So, folks, let's put our hands together for a warm thank you to the panelists.